Good evening, everyone. I'm Gary Laubach, and welcome to the 9th edition of Primetime Pards, where we feature former Lafayette students who have gone on to excel in their chosen fields. There is no better example of that than our guest tonight, a graduate of the class of 1980, Mark Holtzman. And just one announcement during the audience Q&A portion, where you will have a chance to ask questions of Mark. Please utilize the Q&A feature, which can be found in opening participants. Before we go to Mark, let me tell you a little bit about him. With 30 plus years of sports and entertainment experience, Mark Holtzman, class of 80, is currently the vice president of a non-baseball sports events at Yankee Stadium and the new Era Pinstripe Bowl. He was instrumental, and this is very important to Lafayette fans, in the development of the 150th Lafayette-Lehigh football game played at Yankee Stadium. An economics major, Mark was sports director for a student radio station, Wjrh, and was the voice of Lafayette basketball and football for 3 years. After leaving College Hill, he started off working for ProServe, a sports marketing firm, before becoming vice president of sports marketing at Reebok International from 85 to 93. He then spent the next 14 years as senior vice president of marketing and licensing at the National Football League before assuming his current position with the Yankees. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Mark Holtzman. And Mark, welcome. Thanks for taking time. I know you're a really busy guy, but I'm going to maybe say, are you all that busy? With COVID, I'm not sure there was too much you could really accomplish.
Well, first of all, it's great to be with everyone. I had a wonderful experience at Lafayette, and I'm thrilled to be able to share that as well as my future work, my past work experiences and current with everyone. But yeah, COVID was tough. It remains tough as we're slowly coming out of it. I never thought that the governor would play such a big role in the success or failure of our business, but so be it. But we're coming out of it. Yeah, it was a little slow during COVID, but I'm back in the office, and we're looking at potentially close to full crowds at Yankee Stadium starting in the beginning of July. So hopefully COVID will be but a distant memory very shortly.
I assume the pressure's on to fill a lot of dates.
Yeah, the pressure is on to a certain extent. Yes, we still have to get the final go-ahead as far as right now. It's vaccinated versus unvaccinated sections. So that's the rule of the day right now. If you've been vaccinated or you've not been vaccinated, because if you've not been vaccinated, we have to have a separate section, and there has to still be social distancing. But we're getting there, and I think we're pretty close. And look, it's been great to watch the professional playoff games and see people back in the stands, and it'll be great to see a Yankee Stadium rocking once again. And yes, we are starting now to talk about booking stuff for later this year, and then obviously going full force next year.
Your professional travels through life are kind of amazing, actually, and I'm glad we have an opportunity to talk about some of those. But let's go all the way back to your childhood. What kind of kid were you, and who were some of the influences you had as a child?
Well, I was always interested in sports. I mean, I started out, my parents used to tell me that by age 6 or 7, I was reading the sports page in the morning. So I always had this thing for sports. My dad was an orthopedic surgeon, and he was very into sports medicine and took care of a number of big athletes. So that kind of gave me my very early exposure to, athletes. And, I was, my whole family had basically been doctors or lawyers. So I would have had to break with tradition. And I think my parents felt that once I got the sports bug out of me, I'd become a doctor or a lawyer. And, I tried, but it didn't last too long. I was actually pre-med at Lafayette for 1 semester until the formaldehyde from a dogfish in my that I was dissecting in freshman biology, the formaldehyde got in my eyes, and that kind of did me in for that. And then, of course, law school, as I told you, I went to for 1 year before I went to Reebok, and I decided it wasn't for me. The funny thing was, of all things, now I'm digressing a little bit. My wife probably won't like me telling you this, but it's an above board story. My biology partner my freshman year at Lafayette was actually my wife's boyfriend before me.
So you're telling me that dissecting a fish changed your whole life?
Getting the formaldehyde, dissecting a dogfish, decide I wasn't going to be pre-med, and then my personal life, I actually gave, my wife and I were friends in high school. We never dated. I actually gave my freshman biology partner at Lafayette my wife's phone number. He actually called her. He transferred to NYU where she went, and he actually dated her. And then back to me. The Lafayette.
But you turned out to still be the best guy of the two.
Yeah, of course. But to get back to this, before I digress, interestingly enough, my next door neighbor growing up was a guy by the name of Phil Rizzuto.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, sir. And he was actually very instrumental in influencing me. When at a very young age, he would take me to Yankee games with him. It was right next door. I mean, my bed, I could look out my bedroom and I could see his MVP trophy in his den. Oh, and my dad was his personal doctor. And since I was like 10 years old, he would take me to games. And and I would sit in the back of the old sports channel booth there with Frank Messer and Bill White. Remember when he used to broadcast?
Yeah.
Games? And I'd sit there with him, and then of course we'd go back in the seventh inning because he had to miss the traffic on the George Washington Bridge. But he was very instrumental in me getting started, and basically my first exposure to athletes and everything, because he would have, when a big old baseball player who used to play would come into Yankee Stadium for whatever reason, they're coming to New York, they'd always stay at Phil Rizzuto's house. They wouldn't stay at a hotel. And he had this big Tudor house and a lot of bedrooms. And I must tell you, I rode back in that car with some people that was some players that it defied description. I think I was probably 10 years old. My dad would always ask me who it was, and I couldn't even pronounce the names correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So one day when I came back, before we were coming back, Phil said to me, "We're coming back with a guy he's a very well-known former player. And you're probably not going to think he's too nice, but he's just very shy. Don't ask him a lot of questions because he doesn't like to answer questions." And he said, and he told me his name and I kind of forgot it. And it was this tall guy, about, 6'4", 6'5", very elegant looking, and didn't say much. And we rode back and I was told to basically keep quiet the whole way back. So I did. The guy wasn't too friendly. And so, of course, I'm home that night for dinner, and my dad says to me, "So who did you ride back with tonight?" I said, "Well, Dad, I rode back with a guy who Mr. Rizzuto told me was the greatest living baseball player in the world." You know where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
And he said, who's that? Was it Mickey Mantle? No, it wasn't that, Dad. It was this guy. He was not too friendly. His name was like Diageo. Joe Diageo. And my father said, "Oh my God." Oh. So you said, "Do you know, son, who you were riding back with?" I said, "Not really." He said, "He's the Yankee Clipper, the greatest." So 5 minutes later, my dad was going over to Phil's with his doctor's bag to give him some new medication or something, simply because obviously
I was going to say, right. And not because anything was wrong.
Right. But he brought back, I rode in the car with him with Ted Williams. Obviously, Yogi was a very close friend of his. Billy Martin was a very close friend of his. So that was, you talk about early exposure. That was really a lot of early exposure. And then, of course, I started a business while I was at Lafayette College called the College Radio Network, where I interviewed professional athletes from all different sports. And the guy who got me started on it was Phil Rizzuto, because in the day when the Yankees were the greatest professional sports team in the world, and they were winning all those World Series with Munson and Reggie Jackson and those players. And it was very hard to get credentials. I had press credentials when I was at Lafayette College to cover Yankee games, and I was able to go on the field and go in the dugout and interview all the top baseball players.
Well, when you were a child doing this, did your friends realize the connections and the people that you were coming in contact with?
Um, I was told not to really talk about it that much because
Uh-huh.
my father didn't want me to like brag about it, or so I really, other than my, my family, no one else really knew. My father knew, my grandfather knew, and Phil Rizzuto knew.
Right, right. The important people.
But he was a wonderful guy, and really, I'm not sure I'd be in sports today if it wasn't for Phil Rizzuto. And of course, bless his soul, he died before I went back to the Yankees.
Wow. Did you
So,
have aspirations at that time as a child to actually play
I've
the game, or?
always wanted to work for the Yankees. Yeah, I wasn't sure what I wanted. I wanted to be a broadcaster actually for the Yankees.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
But here, everything started with me with the Yankees, and hopefully this is my last stop and it's ending with the Yankees. It's kind of interesting.
Yes, yes.
About-
Full circle.
Yeah.
In high school, were you an athlete? I mean, did you play baseball and play other sports?
I played. I was captain of the tennis team.
Mm-hmm.
I played tennis, and actually, I went on to play tennis at Lafayette College
Right.
For Coach Pete. And then I also was a soccer player, and we had a very good soccer team. I went to the Pingree School, so one of the top soccer teams in the state. And I actually played freshman soccer at Lafayette, and my coach was a guy by the name of Gary Williams when I played soccer at Lafayette, who obviously later went on, obviously to
Pretty
coaching.
good coach. Yeah, pretty good coach.
And also a guy who I think is pretty involved in Lafayette alumni affairs, a guy by the name of Jamie McLaughlin.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they were my two coaches, but I couldn't do it all. And I couldn't do, the radio station stuff, tennis, soccer, and also get passing grades, because Lafayette is not the easiest of schools academically. So I had to cut something out, and I cut soccer out.
Well, even let's go back to your academics at high school. I'm sure there was, knowing how successful your parents were and how professional they were, I'm sure there was a lot of pressure on you to really get good grades, right?
They never, one would have thought that, but, I was never at the top of the class. I was never at the bottom of the class. I was always like in the, top third, whatever, nothing. I could have pushed myself more. I didn't. I mean, there's a lot else I wanted to do. And I always felt that as long as I did decent, that I needed to do other stuff to separate myself, especially when I knew I wanted to get into sports. And a few very big people in sports who I got to meet while I was at Lafayette, people like Dick Schaap, who I met through my father knew someone, and I went in to see him. They all gave me advice to try and do something to differentiate myself. And believe it or not, what I did at Lafayette with that college radio network, I was actually able to get a number of other schools to participate as well in the local area. And we got press passes to all these local events. And I would have all these interviews, and I'd kind of put them all together at WJRH, and we put a little compilation together, and we'd have all these big athletes from different sports. That kind of differentiated me at a young age. And I was able to get interviews that I never thought I'd be able to get because of that. I mean, I had interviews with everyone from, obviously, I did some work for Larry Holmes back then, of course. Mm-hmm. He was the heavyweight champion of the world. While I was at Lafayette, I did some work for him. But I had interviews with like Reggie Jackson, Thurman Munson, Pete Rose, Muhammad Ali. I mean, big athletes in all different sports. I was able to get credentials to, all because I had these Yankee passes, and I had this recommendation from Phil Rizzuto, and it just got me a long way. And so I always was able to kind of differentiate myself from the pack. Actually, when I got out of school, what I always wanted to do is, I was silly enough to think I'd get the job. ABC Sports took one person a year into this program, and they trained him to be a broadcaster. It's a program that a guy by the name of Jim Lampley, who was the big boxing guy there. And
I remember they actually would take two, and then they choose one right at the very end to give him a contract.
Yeah, and basically, you started out with about a few thousand applicants, and they would and they would whittle it down, whittle it down, whittle it down. I remember, I still have the notes. I went back there 13 times.
Oh my.
I made it, believe it or not, to like the final 8.
Wow.
And that was when it stopped, and they actually took Roone Arledge's nephew that year.
Wonder why.
Yeah.
You talked about going to Lafayette, but we haven't talked about making that decision to go to Lafayette. What other schools were you looking at, and why did you choose to go to Lafayette?
I was a little bit of a homebody, and I wanted to be away I wanted to live away from home and experience the campus life. And it was the perfect mix, kind of, because it was far enough away that I was away, yet it was close enough that if I wanted to come back home, I could come back home.
Mm-hmm.
I also felt that, given what I was interested in, that I needed to be close to major metropolitan markets. And I kind of went back and forth between the Philly market and the New York market, when I was at Lafayette. And I was never a big city boy. I never liked the big city.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that I had to make it part of my life if I wanted to get to where I wanted to get. So Lafayette was the good compromise. And I also wanted to go to school. I love tennis. I played tennis my whole life. I wanted to go to school that I could play tennis in. And I didn't want to go to and I also was interested. I did it in high school, the sports editor for the paper and everything, and the radio station. I felt that at a smaller school, I'd have a better chance of getting involved at a more senior level, and not knowing that I'd also have the opportunity at Lafayette to be the broadcaster for both the basketball and the football programs. And I also I don't know if anyone did it after me, I had a call-in talk radio show at Lafayette called Call Up the Boss. And a few nights a week, in between, not everyone liked it. Some people preferred just having the music all the time, but I had a call-in radio sports talk show on WJRH, 90.5 on the FM dial, right? Was it 90.5? I think it was.
So that was obviously start of your interest. But how about, academically, you still had to put in the time to get the grades, and you were an Why economics? Why did you choose that as your major?
Well, I wanted to do some. I wasn't, after the pre-med didn't work out and everything, I wanted basically as broad a background as possible. So I did basically an economics major and a history minor. So I'd have a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
I liked I kind of, I tried out a few different things when I was a freshman, and I liked the professors in both areas, especially in the history department.
Mm-hmm.
I love the professors. I also, besides Bob Wjrh, a guy by the name of Elon Peleg, who was there for like 40 years too. Just terrific people who played a major role in my life. And, back then I always kind of had in the back of my mind too, if sports didn't work out, I was going to have to go to law school. So.
And you wanted to make sure sports worked out.
Yes, I wanted to make sure sports worked out, even though I did, my parents convinced me after working about 2 or 3 years to try law school for a year, which I did. I went through for 1 year and I hated it and I dropped out.
You've mentioned some people already. Let me throw some names at you and tell me the effect that these people had on your life at Lafayette. You talked about Dr. Bob Wjrh. He was an advisor, a history teacher, a professor. Yeah. I know he had a profound effect on you. Yeah,
he was a very special man. And what was great was at the Lafayette-Lehigh game, I was able to rendezvous with him again, and he actually watched the game from my suite at Yankee Stadium. The guy had such humanity. I guess that's the best way to describe it. And was such a warm person. And we had a lot of really soul-searching conversations. as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And and I was involved. I went to he was a head of Hillel at the Lafayette College, just a wonderful guy. And he just became a personal friend as well as professionally. And he just we just hit it off, and he was just a very special guy. And something about him really resonated a certain way with me. And he stayed there a long time. I think he just left the school a few years ago.
And I know tennis was important to you at Lafayette, and a mutual friend of ours, Pete Tomeno, who passed away much too young.
Much too
But
young.
what a great guy he was.
Coach, I was actually, his first year there was my first year at Lafayette. And I remember sitting with Coach Pete at right on Route 22 there. I think it was at the McDonald's or something, talking about the tennis team. And this guy, it was his dream to coach tennis at Lafayette. I mean, his dream. This was what he wanted. And just a wonderful human being. And passed away way too young. Very sad. Just very special. Wonderful coach, wonderful friend. And I really felt like I was part of his family.
Mm-hmm.
He once again taught me some very basic skills that would, augur well for me in future years. Once again, a very humanistic kind. He expected, just like Bob Wjrh did. I mean, he expected you to perform at a high level, but they also gave back. And
yeah, you could not like Pete Tomeno. You just the moment he walked in, he had an aura about him, and yeah, he would just attract people all around him. Wonderful guy.
One of my greatest thrills was that when I was at Reebok, because a school like Lafayette, it's very tough for a lot of the programs to get free goods. I mean, kids had to pay for their own. I was able to supply the tennis team with shoes and clothes from Reebok, and that was a thrill for me to do it.
I was going to say that must have felt good for you and in your heart that you could help in a little way. Gary Williams is a great basketball coach. I'm sure he was not a great soccer coach, but a coach is a coach. I'm sure he taught you a lot of things about life.
Boy, he was intense. And and the funny thing was, here I'm at Reebok, and I'm building a basketball program from scratch. And who I think he was. I think it was when he was. Where was he when I started the program? I think in '85 he was coach at Boston College, I think.
Yeah, he went. Was he at Iowa too before?
No, that was Tom Davis.
Oh, Tom. Okay.
Gary Williams went to from Lafayette to American to Boston College, then to Maryland.
Right, Maryland. He finished.
I think, yeah, I think he was at Boston College when I launched the basketball program for Reebok in 1985, and we wanted to get into college athletics. That was a way to get a lot of exposure, and back then it wasn't too expensive, and the coaches decided what shoes the school wore. And I called up Boston College. I said, Coach, remember me? He remembered me, and we actually signed him up. And they were one of the first schools to wear basketball programs to wear Reeboks. So we got to know each other. Here he was my coach at Lafayette College, and then 5 or 6 years later, I get to know we're dealing with each other professionally, which was kind of neat.
Well, we talked a little bit before going on the air how being in the right place, right time has such an effect on everybody's life, and obviously also on yours. Because of your doing the Lafayette basketball and football games, you spent a lot of time too with SID Doug Elgin, and he was special to you too.
Absolutely, he was great, and I asked him a lot of questions, hung out in his office a lot, and unbelievably enough, once again, we hadn't spoken for a while, but X amount of years later, there he is, commissioner of the Sun Belt Conference, and I'm doing, a college bowl game at Yankee Stadium, and I'm going to NCAA meetings, and who do I run into? Doug Elgin. And that was really special too. I mean, that I once again, like I said, you never know in life.
Exactly. That's why I think it's important to treat everybody the way you want to be treated.
Absolutely, absolutely.
A guy everybody knew at Lafayette was Marty Zippel. He was special to everybody.
Oh, Marty was great. I got to, he was kind of my adopted father there for a while. I got to know him through broadcasting the Lafayette games, and he used to have me to his house for dinner, and he had me to his club to play golf, and boy, how many years was he sitting in those seats there in the Kirby gym there, rooting the team on? Of course, he had a storied career at Lafayette, but
Mm-hmm.
what a special, another one who was a pretty big influence to me, Marty Zippel. What a great guy,
He
really.
probably had the same seat I had when I broadcast the games. You look straight across, and there was Marty, and he was into every game as if he
Yeah,
was still playing the game.
yeah. Oh, unbelievable. Yeah.
I read a quote that you had when talking about your Lafayette career and what Lafayette taught you, and I love the quote. Self-confidence combined with a sense of humanity and humility. What more would you want to get out of an experience than that?
Oh no, I had a wonderful experience at college. I was very fortunate.
Well, let's get into your career because it's a lengthy one and obviously a successful one. First job, pro serve. You were
Mhm.
assisting a professional athlete agent.
Right.
David, talk about that.
Well, yeah. Once again, you need a break to break through into sports, and I had kind of a little bit of a resume from college, but it's very tough. There was no such thing as sports marketing back then. And I read about these two companies, the International Management Group, started by a guy by the name of Mark McCormick, IMG,
Mm-hmm.
and ProServe, started by a guy by the name of Donald Dell, who was the former Davis Cup captain, and you know started the sports law. They represented Jimmy Connors, Yvonne Lendl, back then, Buck Williams, later, of course, Michael Jordan, and they got very big. And, I needed it was my dream. If I, once again, to start out at one of those two companies is a dream, because they were the two now they're 500 sports marketing firms and their agents. And back then it was very different. They were the two sports marketing companies. And so I was fortunate enough to have an aunt, my mom's sister, who was a big shot in the advertising world. And she, a major client of hers was Colgate. And Colgate was the sponsor of the men's Grand Prix of tennis back then. So she got to know Donald Dell's partner through that, believe it or not, and got me an interview there, which was very tough to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And I did well enough in the interview, they hired me. And I moved to Washington, D.C., and it was a terrific job right out of school. I was involved helping Donald and David Falk represent athletes, put on some events. I got them their coffee. I drove them to the airport. A little bit of everything, but through the little bit of everything, I got to be involved in eventually recruiting athletes. I was involved in the failed recruitment of Ralph Sampson.
Mm-hmm.
I was involved in the successful recruitment of Buck Williams and Michael Jordan. I wasn't much out of school then, so I could basically sift into the college campus, and they thought I was part of the campus, really. I mean, I hung out on the University of Virginia campus for almost a month trying to recruit Ralph Sampson. It's funny. The last game that I broadcast for Lafayette we've actually made, I think, the NIT that year, and we played the University of Virginia at University of Virginia against a freshman by the name of Ralph Sampson. And and then here I am, a bunch of years later, not too many, trying to recruit him on the campus. So that was kind of interesting. David Falk obviously was a young lawyer back then, was a master at what he did, learned a tremendous amount from him. Got to travel around the world. I did on the tennis circuit a little bit for kind of being the liaison for the company with the players. Put on basketball exhibitions around the world. Back then, we were allowed to barnstorm players in the off season, and the players weren't making that much money in the NBA. So they made money in the off season, and we had great players who barnstormed. I mean, believe it or not, Dr. J barnstormed, Moses Malone, players like that, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson.
Wow.
They all barnstormed, and I got to actually take a lot of these athletes around the world and all around the country as we barnstormed, with them. The NBA then outlawed that as the money got bigger, but yeah. And so Pro Serve was a great experience. Look, at a very young age, I got tremendous exposure. The problem was for me there's kind of a lid. It was a law firm first and foremost. So for me to get ahead further in sports, if I wanted to go that direction, which right then I was trending towards being an agent, I had to go to law school. And my parents, who always wanted me to go to professional school, encouraged that significantly. And so I bit the bullet. And after a few years, I left Pro Serve and I went to Rutgers Law School for a year. And didn't like it.
Didn't like it.
Just wasn't for me. I mean, after traveling around the world, getting the exposure, and if I never had the job at Pro Serve and didn't get the exposure I had, get to go to all the Wimbledons and the French Opens and do the basketball stuff. And I probably would have just sat through law school and it wouldn't have made a difference, but I had that exposure. So I couldn't sit in my seat. Right. I had answers. And so I knew I had to do something else. And that's when someone upstairs was shining down on me. And I talked to you about being at the right place at the right time, which I tell kids who I talk to today is 50% of the battle. I decided I wasn't going to go back to law school. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. My parents weren't too happy.
Sure.
And that summer I worked for just see where I want to go with it. I worked for a lady who was doing some PR for some companies in New York who kind of did work in sports and everything. And she was able to, we did some junior tennis tournaments. We promoted some junior tennis tournaments. And at a junior tennis tournament, I meet this guy by the name of Paul Fireman, just out of purely, and we're starting to sit down talking. He's a decent amount older than me. And, I go back to learning humanity and compassion. And this guy seemed kind of down in the dumps. He seemed kind of depressed, and we were just talking. I wasn't doing anything for the moment. And we get to talking, and he starts to tell me about his life, and he's at a crossroads, and just kind of opened up to me. And, his family's fish and tackle business went belly up. His marriage wasn't great. And he's just started this new company, but he's having funding issues. And he still thinks it's going to be a big hit. But right now, everything's in flux. And so we went out and said, "What, you want to hit a few tennis balls with me?" I said, "Sure." So we went out, we hit a few tennis balls, and we got off the court, and I really took a liking to the guy, and he was there for a few days. And so we got to talking, and he said, "I'm not sure what you're doing, but I'd love you to work for my company." I said, "Huh? So tell me about your company." He said, "Well, first of all, just so you know, there's a 50% chance we're not going to be in business." I thought that's a great thing. So, but there was something about the guy I just felt in my gut. I loved the guy. And I said, son, I was ready for a change and everything. And I really felt it was best I get out of the state a little bit since I left law school, and my parents were a little ashamed of me. And so I told the guy, "Okay, I'll give it a shot." It was for a very minimal salary. And so I go up to Massachusetts, and where the company was based. And after a few months, he basically says to me, I can't pay anymore. So what? He said, well, the letter of credit, the shipment of shoes, it's on the word. So I wasn't sure what to do, but I wasn't going to come back and be embarrassed, come home. So he said, so we worked out a deal where for what he couldn't pay me in salary, he'd pay me in stock. And I didn't quite understand it back then. And I said, well, what's the stock's worth? Nothing right now. We could be going, he said, yeah, it could be worth nothing, but if we turn it around, could be worth a lot of money someday. All right. So we fast forward a little bit. The company, by the way, I'll give it away. The company's name was Reebok.
Yeah, right.
And we're on basically the balls of our you-know-what. And we came up with basically what happened was Paul had traveled out to California. This was back in 1984. And he saw this new sport out there that people were basically going barefoot. They were wearing moccasins. They were wearing old running shoes. And he said, you know something, Mac? In his Massachusetts accent, he says, we're going to create a shoe for them. But the only problem was we didn't have the money to create the shoe. So we were literally down to our last shipment of shoes, which were supposed to be running shoes, okay? Mm-hmm. They came in wrong. They came in off the dock wrong. I remember 30,000 pair of running shoes. The leather was distressed. It was crinkled. And also, when you wear a running shoe, you need a 3/4 heel wrap so you don't roll your ankle over. It had a 1/4 heel wrap. So there was no support. So you're going to kill yourself. But it came in all different colors. So what we did is we decided to call it an aerobic shoe.
Wow. And it became a success.
Up these stories. I mean, we tell the stories told at Harvard Business School now. So we went out, a bunch of us went out to California and gave the shoes away for nothing, up and down Pacific Coast Highway from LA to San Francisco. We didn't sell them, which is a good lesson to never be short-sighted. We gave the shoes away to every fitness instructor. No one had ever done that before. No one ever gave away free stuff. We gave it away and hoped that there'd be a viral effect. And we gave the shoes out, and for a few days there were no calls. Then a few consumers started calling. Then a few more started calling. And then what happened was, I guess a lot of them were calling Foot Locker. Mm-hmm. And Foot Locker said, we've never heard of the thing. There's nowhere to get the shoe. We had no more shoes because we had no more money. Make a long story short, Foot Locker, after about a month, ringing off the hook, how can we get these shoes? We work out a deal with them. We're back in business.
And didn't you then, at one point, you were greater in terms of sales than Nike and Adidas?
We passed Nike for about a month. Yeah. Wow. And then, of course, what happened, we basically created product placement at Reebok, and no one else was doing it. Now everyone puts their product in the movies and online and everything. They pay huge fortunes to promote it. We didn't pay a nickel. We just provided the product. No one else did it. We actually combined with Ray-Ban back then to do it. And we kind of partnered up together because they were a much more well-known brand than us. We were in Top Gun, Top Gun that made those aviators.
Yeah, the sunglasses, yeah.
We were the footwear. We were the footwear in Ghost with Whoopi Goldberg. We were the footwear with Tom Hanks when he played the piano in Big. And then, of course, the big one, we gave the shoes out to a lot of entertainers in Hollywood. And in 1984, Sybil Shepherd won the Academy Award for Moonlighting with Bruce Willis.
Yep, right. The Emmy. Yeah.
Unbeknownst to us, we'd given her some shoes. She not only wore the shoes to the Academy Awards, she wore them on stage. She gets up to accept the award, pulls up her dress a little bit, and says, "I want to thank my lucky orange high tops from Reebok. I couldn't have done it without."
And you're screaming, yeah, yeah.
That's where we're going with it. I can't even describe it. I mean, 200 million people watching it. I mean, you don't make this stuff up. I mean, it's just crazy stuff. Someone was looking out for us, and from there,
you had Venus and Serena Williams at one point. You had Bruce Springsteen at one point. You had the Olympic basketball dream team at one point.
well, we had to be very creative. We had to be very creative because we did not have the money to compete against Nike and Adidas. So what we would do is we try and scope out these tennis players when they were very young. And obviously they were amateurs, so we couldn't sign them. We'd sign up the parents to be like our advisors.
Oh.
And I was, we actually had UCLA as a basketball team, a guy by the name of Walt Hazard. Remember him? He was from Philly.
Yeah, played for the Knicks.
And he kept saying to me, I got to meet these two girls, Venus and Serena. And they were like maybe 8 and 11 years old then or whatever. And I was like, well, show me their results in junior tennis tournaments. They wouldn't play any. It says if they didn't play junior tennis tournaments, how good could they be? Well, finally, one day he literally kidnapped me and took me to Watts. And I had my racket with me. And he said to me, basically, you're going to play a set with Venus and Serena Williams, whether you like it or not. Felt like I was taking my life into my hands when I went. Boy, talk about a tough neighborhood.
Yeah, right.
And I played a set against, I guess, an 11-year-old Venus and an 8 or 9-year-old Serena. And who would have known for sure? No one could have predicted they would turn out how they did. But you know something? They were a good enough story. I felt it was worth taking a shot.
Wow.
And Paul Fireman thought I was crazy at first, although now he says it was his idea. And we signed him up, and the rest is history. The unfortunate part of history is once they got very big, we couldn't afford both of them. And back then, Venus was bigger than Serena. So we decided to keep the wrong one.
There was really no way to lose that decision, I don't think, with the two of them.
Serena, became the all-time.
Yes. I see, as I suspected, that time is flying here. So I'm not sure how much time we're going to be able to spend on the NFL, but I want you to tell, you did have one story where things didn't work out the way you wanted, and that was with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Tell that story.
Yeah, that was once again when I was at Reebok, and we had the entertainment bug, so to speak. And we always tried to do stuff that was a little unique and a little different and kind of get in through the back door. And we had the opportunity through a contact to get involved with the President's Council for Physical Fitness. George Bush was the president back then, I think. And he had appointed Arnold to be the head of the President's Council for Physical Fitness. And Arnold needed to deliver some big sponsors for that. So we agreed to be a sponsor for that. And in return, Arnold agreed to do his first ever commercial endorsement, which was for our Reebok line of fitness shoes. And a very big coup. And to make a long story short, we delivered our end, and Arnold didn't deliver his end. I mean, I literally went back to his house 6 or 7 times to get him to approve the creative. And back then he was married to Maria Shriver. He'd show it to Maria. And usually when an athlete or an entertainer doesn't approve the creative, there's something else behind it, because it was very basic vanilla creative. And we were going to pay him a lot of money. And I sensed there might be problems. Finally, he approved the boards. And I was a little nervous, but we wanted to go ahead with it. It was going to be a big coup for us. Arnold Schwarzenegger was huge back then. He was, all the biggest films back then, the Terminator films, just huge. He was the biggest guy out there. And so we hire a very expensive ad agency. It's in California, very expensive. So we've literally laid down already 7 figures. And and Arnold is in his trailer. He has his own private trailer with makeup artists and everything. And everyone's out there and they're ready to shoot. And Arnold's not walking out of his trailer. And I knew that I had a feeling I was in trouble. And I knock on the door. He doesn't answer his trailer. Finally, the door opens up and he looks at me and says, "What do you want?" I said, "Arnold, what do I want? Arnold, you're late. Everyone's waiting out here. I'm paying this agency by the hour. We have a commercial to shoot. I changed my mind. I'm not doing it."
Oh my
I said,
God.
"Arnold, how could you do that? We have an agreement." And he like pins me up against the wall. He's like 1 inch from me. And he says, "I'm not doing it. It's not right. I'm not doing an endorsement." I said, "Arnold, the ship has sailed on that. Come on." And it was then we got his agent on the line, and it became very ugly.
Oh, I'm
And
sure.
everyone has no idea what's going on. And here I am in the back of a trailer with the biggest box office star in the world. I think he's ready to punch me out or something. Or I don't know what, I'm getting in a fight with him and he's screaming at me. So his agent, gets on the line and says, I thought maybe they're going to try and hold me up for more money or something, or just didn't want to do it. So we finally reach a compromise. It's unbelievable compromise where he would do the advertisement, but he wouldn't wear Reeboks, which didn't do a lot of good.
No, right.
But my thought process was we had a contract with him. Let him not wear the Reeboks, and I'd sci-tech the Reeboks in afterwards on his feet because he had a signed contract with us.
Unbelievable.
And that's basically what we had to do. But that was my experience with Arnold, the Terminator.
The Terminator. He tried to terminate you and he couldn't do it.
He tried to terminate me. Yeah, but that was pretty crazy. I had a lot of crazy experiences those are great years when I was at Reebok. By the time I got to the NFL, I got a big promotion. I was running a very big business. I mean, the licensing worldwide for the NFL. So very serious job, very numbers oriented. So I didn't have as much time to do a lot. I did go to 15 straight Super Bowls, but I didn't have time to really do a lot of the fun stuff that I was able to do when I was at Reebok.
Yeah, 14 years at NFL, right?
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
It was great experience.
My initial question would have been, why did you leave Reebok? But then my next obvious question is, why do you leave the NFL? Just because it was the Yankees?
No, I'll get it. It's fine. Something, when I thought I'd never leave Reebok. I mean, I was living on a lake. Right, it was a very progressive company. I was 10 minutes from work, riding my bicycle to work, coming home after work, going on a jet ski. And the last thing I wanted to do was to go back to New York City, commuting 3 hours a day and, sweating on the train and everything. But what happened was after we went public, the company started to change. And, I was very high up there very fast at a very young age. But I didn't have any gray hair back then. And the feeling was by the shareholders and by certain people there that they needed someone who was a little older and a little more seasoned to talk to Wall Street, to be basically, and I was spoiled.
Yeah.
And frankly, I could have been there forever, but things started to change a little bit. And I wasn't openly looking to leave necessarily. It had to be something really special. But at the same time, if something really, I just had my first kid and everything. My parents lived back here. Phil Rizzuto was back here still.
Full
And
circle.
if the right opportunity came up, I'd at least consider it. And it just happened, once again, being at the right place at the right time. Reebok started a cleated line. Unbeknownst to me, the NFL had been trying to do a deal with Nike for years. Nike wouldn't agree to terms. They did their homework at the NFL and they found out about my relationship with Paul Fireman, how close I was. And they basically felt if they brought me on board, I'd deliver Reebok. And if I delivered Reebok, that would mean Nike would have to come on board because we were their biggest rival.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I was negotiating at that time Reebok's entry into the NFL. And the commissioner back then of the NFL, a guy by the name of Paul Tagliabue, befriended me. And next thing you know, I was sitting on Park Avenue, making that miserable commute every day, doing what I promised. I never said I would do it. I said I'd never do it again.
But you always said you wanted to work for the Yankees.
But I've always said, I never thought once again that, the Yankees were still in the back of my mind, but at that point, I wasn't sure how that would ever occur. And I was with the NFL a long time. And, it became, once again, I was at a very senior position there, one of the top jobs in the whole company. And, running licensing worldwide and running club marketing, which was a very interesting job back then, because that was when Jerry Jones was trying to break away from the NFL and do his own thing. And all the new owners were coming in, and it was capitalism versus socialism. So it was a very interesting time.
I don't want to slight the people that are watching, because I do have a few questions that I am supposed to ask, but I do want to get to the Lafayette-Lehigh situation, playing the 150. Scott Alenek says, "Hi, Mark. Scott Alenek here. Long time no speak. Enjoyed reliving some of your Lafayette experiences. Distinctly remember Charlie Nadoff dunking over Ralph Sampson and your reaction that I heard over the radio. Unfortunately, not enough to win, but nonetheless something I always remember. Hope to be able to catch up." I have my own pet phrase. It's, "Oh my." I'm sure you had one too.
Oh, I'm not sure what I said for that. And hi, Scott. That's sure. I've known Scott since I've been, believe it or not, about 5 years old. That's how far we go back. So yeah, great to hear from you. But yeah, no, I do remember a guy by the name of Mike Bellamy.
Yes.
He'd shoot like this high arcing shot before there was a point line. I'd always say, "Here's the rainbow." I knew that was catching on when I was studying at the Skillman Library one night. Someone was throwing a piece of paper into the garbage can, and they said, "Here's the rainbow."
Charlie Daniel asked you, probably need a quick answer. How did your time at WJRH influence your career?
Wow, Charlie Daniel. I remember I ran into Charlie. Nice to hear from you again. Yeah, no, WJRH that was real. That was a special time. And because I was at a school like Lafayette, I was given the opportunities I never would have had at a bigger school. And there was actually, I don't know if he's on this, but a guy who I've maintained contact with over the years, who for WJRH, he was a major impact on me, a guy by the name of Mike Lagatuda. And he's now in Tampa. I actually saw him a few years ago when I was down in Tampa for spring training. Yeah, but what other place would I have had the opportunity to start a sports radio talk show?
Wow.
So no, it was a great. Now WJRH has a special place in my heart, and also I was able to, when I was a sophomore, start broadcasting the games. I mean, how many kids get that kind of an opportunity, to do that? And I was able to do it sophomore through my senior year. So once again, another component that if I didn't have, I don't believe I'd be where I am today.
And I think you would agree that once that seed is planted in terms of broadcasting and being part of the sports agenda and arena, it's hard to get rid of it. It's a bug that you want to keep pursuing throughout your life.
Oh no, I got the bug at absolutely. I got the, and it was because it was a smaller school and I had the opportunities. I mean, I wasn't the most talented guy in the world. Didn't have the greatest radio voice in the world. Was definitely too nasal. But you know something? I had the opportunity. I was given the opportunity, and people let me run with it.
It's all about passion, right?
Yeah.
I have a classmate, Erica. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Bonamy, class of '80.
Erica, Kirby House.
There you go. Probably some stories there too. Mark, great to see you and hear your story. I can't believe it took over 40 years to hear the Phil Rizzuto stories.
Yeah, it took a long time. Like I said, I keep a lot of it over the years. But my wife told me it's time to my wife actually wants me to write a book at some point, my experiences. But yeah, Phil Rizzuto, boy, bless his soul. Now, how lucky was that I was his next door neighbor?
Yeah, unbelievable. And I think a book should be an option. Hey,
Yeah.
let's talk 150. Lafayette wants to play a special Lafayette-Lehigh game, the 150th anniversary. Bruce McCutcheon has this idea. You are certainly part of creating that idea. I think everybody was scared to death that it might not be the right thing to do, but it was the absolutely right thing to do. Talk a bit about that experience before we go.
Okay, sure. Well, look, if I'd be fooling you if I said I expected 50,000 people there. I mean, no one dreamt that in 1,000 years. I mean, to this day, it's one of the most successful events since I've been with the Yankees that we've had at Yankee Stadium. Look, I give Bruce a lot of credit. I think his biggest, the biggest booster of the football team didn't show up for the game, apparently, because he was not a supporter of it. So Bruce had to go against some pretty strong public opinion there. Look, I understand the branding and the value of media and assets. And one thing I've learned at the Yankees and at the NFL and everything is the value if you have a powerful brand behind you. Look, and part of the deal for this game is that we were going to promote it on the Yes Network. I mean, and we were going to promote it in stadium at Yankee Stadium, you know, where we sell out a lot of the games. So I knew that even if we weren't going to get that many people to travel from Lafayette and Lehigh, that just by the sheer weight of the media and what we would do, we'd hopefully get 15,000 people there. And if it didn't look like we were, I just pound out more media until we get to 15,000 people. What happened was just, and I also give the AD at the Lehigh, Joe Sterrett, a lot of credit. First of all, the two of them worked together magnificently. I had a vision how the blueprint would go, and it involved a lot of unorthodox things. But to give Bruce and Joe credit, they bought into the blueprint. And I'll never forget, I went to the Lehigh game, Lafayette-Lehigh game. It was at Lehigh that year. And we announced it at halftime of the game. And what we did is we put up on the screen, we did this video, and we had Babe, and people didn't know what was going on. There was a buzz about it. You saw Babe Ruth up there hitting the first home run at Yankee Stadium. You saw Reggie Jackson up there. You saw Yogi Berra jumping into Don Larson's arms when he pitched the perfect game. I mean, you saw the great Joe DiMaggio. So you knew something was going on, and the people started going crazy. And then they gave me the microphone, and it was like, guess what, guys? What's happening next year, Yankee Stadium, a year from now? And the people went nuts, just absolutely nuts. And I knew then that we had something special. And I had no idea. I mean, this thing, it sold out literally in 2 weeks. It was, everyone was absolutely full. It was, I can't even describe it. And, it just made me feel so good. I was, for my old alma mater and everything, actually did something good for him. It was
Did you have trouble selling it to the people above you or your bosses? I mean, you're talking a guy.
Sell it a little bit because it was, that level of game, Yankee Stadium, would it resonate? And look, there was definitely some risk involved, but I just had this feeling that it would be really special and never dreamt. I mean, and we made it bigger than the event itself. It became, I took a lot of pages out of what I used to do for the Super Bowl at the NFL. So we had a host hotel for both schools down, and I insisted we do it in Manhattan, not in New Jersey. We had a host hotel. Each school did a week of events. Each school reached out to all their alumni classes and gave them goals to reach. I mean, I think both schools literally, because I spoke at, stuff the week leading up to it, both schools literally had almost every, if not every state represented at the game. I mean, the hotels were basically booked by Lafayette and Lehigh, big hotels. I mean, it was crazy. And then, of course, on top of it, maybe the most virtuoso performance by the Lafayette football team in how many years?
Yeah, right.
I mean, crushed them. And I'd obviously be very careful not to show my colors.
Not on this station.
But no, it was just, to this day, it's something I'll never forget for the rest, the rest of my life. Really, what a special day. And once in a while,
that's so etched into my mind. I can't believe it was 6.5 years ago.
No, it's incredible. I mean, it's the question is, would it work again? I don't know.
Well, 160's coming up.
I mean, a lot of it was the magic of, I mean, it was written up in the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we actually had a shot, believe it or not. It didn't happen at the last minute, of getting ESPN Game Day. It ended up not happening, but I had a little elf that was helping me out a little bit, a guy by the name of OJ, who I obviously
watching, by the way. Tom was our first primetime part.
Yeah, no, he brought this to me. And when I was at Lafayette, Doug Elgin would always talk about OJ to me and everyone else, Mike Lagatuda. And if you want to get into sports, you got to be like OJ, at ESPN. I heard so much about the guy, and then I actually, get to work with him. Maybe 25, 30 years later, after I graduate from Lafayette, and we was at the Big East, and we become very close friends. And he's a wonderful guy. Get to know his family, and I'm hoping to see him again this summer. He's come to visit me at Yankee Stadium. Once again, another situation where you never know who you're going to meet in your next life.
Well, after spending a little over an hour with you, I think your wife is absolutely correct. You got to start putting pen to paper. These are great stories that I think would interest so many people. I'd have to say we're going to have to stop, even though I have a number of other things that I certainly could talk about. Jay-Z, Eminem, putting on concerts. As a marketing guy, though, what's the first big event you're going to be showing at Yankee Stadium now that you've come back?
We're going kind of slow this year.
Mm-hmm.
Get through the baseball. I would
unknowns.
The first big event is going to be the New Era Pinstripe Bowl.
Okay.
In December. I don't think there are going to be any concerts this year, although that could change.
Mm-hmm.
But the Pinstripe Bowl, it's the Big Ten versus the ACC at Yankee Stadium. I think it's December 29th this year on ESPN. That'll probably be the first big non-baseball event. And then assuming that, the virus continues to subside and everything, and we have full clearance to fill the stadium, we'll get into a lot of other things, because there are still some, obviously everything's opening up, but there's still, until you hit a certain level of vaccinations, I don't want to bore everyone, but they're vaccinated and unvaccinated sections of the stadium. And in the unvaccinated sections, you have to have social distancing. And so we're still a little bit away from being able to promise a full house. And especially for concerts, you have to have a full house because so expensive.
Yeah.
But we will get there.
Mark, thanks so much. Stay healthy. I wish the very best to you and your family. And I hope at some point our paths cross in reality, not virtually. Thanks for the time.
It'll be my pleasure. Go Pards.
Go Pards is right. I do want to mention everyone out there that the Maroon Club Golf outing is June 28th at the Steel Club. There you see on your screen exactly how you can go about becoming a part of the Maroon Club outing. Even if you don't play golf, you can certainly in some way help the Maroon Club in terms of their fundraising. My thanks to Mark Holtzman. He's been a terrific guest tonight. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you have enjoyed it too. This is Primetime Pards. I'm Gary Laubach. Good night, everybody.